This video accompanies the Trick or Treat toffee apples, of which there are 6 different designs in the full collection. So the overall concept is that we are crocheting a toffee apple, and what you will be making is an apple that has an insert crocheted in. You get the stick within your kit, so it means that you can hook up an apple that fits nicely onto a stick like that. But then there are 6 different designs that you can dress your apple up for Halloween. Some you actually crochet into the apple, so it's not that you can put the layer on afterwards, but I'll explain all of that in the video. So the 6 different designs, just to give you a look at all of those. This is skeletal, so this is a skull, complete with the embroidery that goes on the back. Then you've got haunted, which has got the embroidery of the cobwebs on the back. Then you've got lantern. So this one, you're dressing it up as a jack-o'-lantern. Then you've got venomous, complete with spider and a cobweb that goes around the outside. Then we have rotten, which I know has been a favourite of many, with a removable Clyde the maggot that goes through a central hole. And then last but by no means least, we've also got poison, where you've got the drips coming across the top, and it's complete with a leaf. Now there are loads of different techniques across the 6 designs, but I've decided to put them all here in one video for you. So I will do a whistle-stop tour through all the different techniques, because I know that it's quite hard to resist wanting to make more than one of them. So all your techniques will be here. Some of them are easier than others, and I'll flag all of that as we go through. So happy Halloween, and enjoy hooking up some of these woolly trick-or-treat kits. So let's approach constructing and finishing the basic apple first. So this really is about getting this insert in the right place so that then your stick will fit in. So when you've crocheted your apple, what you'll be starting with is actually a chain 8 and then slip stitch to join into a circle. And this might feel a bit odd at the time, but it really was to get it to go onto the stick. Because for me, the thing that's very fun and what I wanted them to be is definite play food. So I wanted that stick to be able to sit in and hold firmly onto that apple. Now, just to mention tension for a second, obviously ordinarily, tension wouldn't matter when we do this style of crochet, but if you do want to insert that on a stick, just make sure that you have got your tension loose enough that that's going to fit well. The little test would be crochet your insert first. So where it says stick insert, crochet your stick insert first, which is what this is. Now, just to be extra fussy, because we can, I'm actually also going to invert it so it's right side in. So my wrong side is on the outside like that. Just double check that your lollipop stick fits nicely into that insert before you carry on. Now, if you can't get that stick into that insert, then increase your hook size a little bit so that it's going to be a little bit bigger. But remember that you do want it to be snug. It's no good if it's loosely fitting on it as well, because it means that it'll fall off. So you do want it to be a bit snug in terms of pushing that in place. Then what you do with your apple is, so this is my bottom. I'll just show you, with your bottom, you actually decrease down to a point. That's quite standard on a lot of my fruit and veg, just to give you a little bit more realism in that shaping, so it isn't just ball shapes that you're making. So when you've finished off the bottom, all you do is you gather that point like that, so your bottom's a point, and then you pull it right the way through like that, so it inverts. So it just gives you a little bit more realism in terms of the actual shape of the bottom of an apple. So that's the bottom. But then with the top, what you want to do is you take your insert that you've just made and push it inside the apple like that. So it's in line with the piece that you've chained to begin with. And then what you need to do is just double crochet through both sides of those bits of fabric. So I'm just going to pull my tail out of the way so it's not in the way for you to see what I'm doing. And then I've got 8 stitches that I've finished on my insert, and I've obviously got 8 stitches from my chain start with my apple. And so what I'm going to do is crochet between a stitch from my chain start and then a stitch from my insert. Now, if you need to just push your insert in a bit more, use your hook to push that down like that. And what I wanted it to be is quite discreet and hidden. So rather than starting off with a big hole in the top or anything like that, I wanted it to be quite a closed up, discreet hole, which means that if you don't want to put the stick in, then you absolutely can. You can display them just as apples, and it's not that you can see that something is missing from the top of it. So all you need to do is run round the edge, making sure you've got your hook in the stitch that is your starting chain and then the last stitch on your insert. So like that, so you've done a small round of stitches like that, and then what you can do is push that lolly stick in, and it means that your apple will hold itself firmly in place on that insert, so it can be toy food and have that stick in if you want it to be. So that's the stick insert. Then you'll have yarn inside your kit to make the stalk separately. So I'm not going to go through that, just to really show you that you sew the stalk on to one side of that hole. So there's my stick insert there. I'm just a couple of rounds up that I've actually sewn that stalk on into position, but you can always do that at the very end. Right, so I'm just going to sew that end on so that's in. And now I'm going to run through the apples almost in order of difficulty. So the easiest one is the haunted. So this will be the simplest one here. And all I want to show you is to really have a good look at the embroidery that I've put on the back in order to give it that cobweb feel. Obviously, all of this is entirely optional. So this is a nice basic kind of double crochet increases, and then you're doing increases at the bottom to do the frills. So the one thing that I want to show you to do with haunted is to just recap all the different stitches for you so that you've seen them there, because this will be relevant to quite a lot of other projects as well. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a little small disc of 12 stitches from which I can just show you these different stitches. So just to recap the different heights of stitches for you, the different types of stitches that you might hit in these patterns. If it says to slip stitch, what you'll do for a slip stitch is you'll go in the next stitch like that, yarn over and bring that through the whole stitch and then through the loop that is on your hook. So that is a slip stitch. So you go in, through and right the way through. Then a double crochet is what you're doing by and large for all of this. So you go in, yarn over and through the two loops in one motion. So that is your double crochet. It is a British double crochet or a US single crochet, but that is the DC within your pattern. Then a half treble. So this is the next highest stitch, is a half treble. For a half treble, you go round your hook with your yarn first. So you yarn over first, come in, yarn over to the point where you've got 3 loops on your hook, and then you yarn over and you come through all 3 loops in one motion. So that is a half treble. So I'll just do that again for you. So round, in, through to the point where you've got your 3 loops, and then yarn over and come through all 3 loops in one motion. Then your treble. So your next tallest one, you go round the hook first, in, through to the point where you've got your 3 loops, but this time you yarn over and you come through the first 2, and then you yarn over and you come through the second 2. So you do it in 2 separate motions. So that's the treble. So in, so you round the hook, in, through to the point you've got 3 loops, yarn over and through the first 2, and then yarn over and through the second 2. Now you won't need this for the haunted, but I'm going to show you anyway. So as we're going through them now, the double treble is the only other stitch that you'll need within these patterns. And the double treble, you go round the hook once and then round a second time. So you've got 2 wraps on your hook before you begin. So just to show you that again, if it's a double treble or a DTR, you go round once and then round a second time. Then go in the stitch and yarn over. So you'll have 4 on your hook at this stage. And then you take them off in 2s as we did with the treble. So you come round and through 2, then yarn over again and through the next 2. And then yarn over again and through the last 2. That is a double treble. And you can see there, you can see all these different heights of stitch. So your slip is by far your lowest one. You'll barely see an increase in the size of your piece when you slip. You've got your double crochet, your half treble, your treble, and then your double trebles. They're all the different heights of stitches that we'll be using throughout these patterns. So that's really all you need in order to do your haunted. That's a nice easy one. Just to show you really what you do once you've finished is you can just all the pieces and the clothing start with that chain 8 in the same way, or a chain 9, so it's got a little bit more space to it. So all you do at the end is you push your stick in. Once you put your costume effectively on your apple, you can then push your stick in right the way through. And just to emphasize, I have always sewn the stalks onto the apple underneath. So the stalk is sewn to the apple underneath, and then the outfit just goes on top slotting over the top of it. You don't have to do it that way though. If you want to sew these in place so that they don't remove, then you obviously can just pop your stalk on afterwards on the top of that apple, should you wish. Right, so that's Haunted covered, and I hope you've had a good look at the embroidery there so you see how to do it. Just to talk you through it, you'll be doing a few longer lines and then just embroidering between those pieces. So I'll just show you that for a second here on this apple. So if you were going to embroider a cobweb onto something, what you will do is come through where you want the center of the cobweb to be, and you'll just draw a few lines, and they can be quite irregular. Don't worry about them all being the same length. Like that. And this is quite similar to the way that we will actually be crocheting the cobweb on the Venomous one. All you'll do then is just go in and embroider the lines like that in between the others. So you go round embroidering a circle, and you see how I'm almost doing long back stitches. So I'm going to the next one and then sewing around it and then coming on to the one that follows. Like that. And that's all you're going to do, is embroider in between the lines that you set up initially. To create a cobweb pattern on the back of your Haunted. Now, some of you will be far better embroiderers than me, those of you that do like to do different crafts like embroidery, and I'm sure you can really go to town on putting it in the detail on some of these. So that's all you do to add those cobweb motifs onto the back of your Haunted one. While I've got the embroidery in my hand, because we're going to move on to Skeletal next, just to show you what I've done is a couple of these kind of skull break motifs on the back of this one, and all I've done there is done one straight line like that, and then just sewn across the length of it like that to create those kind of motifs like it's been cracked or sewn up. So that's the embroidery covered. There's no other embroidery, that's it. So that's the embroidery for the Haunted and the Skeletal. Obviously you could choose to add more embroidery onto the others if you wish. So what I want to cover next really with the Skeletal is actually this tiny little bit of front post, back post here, which is what represents the teeth. So we're going to be doing trebles, and we're going to be doing front post, back post in trebles. So all I'm going to do is pull backwards a second, and then I'm going to increase this out for you, just so we've got a few more stitches to play with. So with this one, what you're going to have done is you're going to have crocheted the whole of the skull effectively using our double crochet stitches, normal techniques, exactly what we've been doing with the Haunted. And the only piece that's a bit more unusual is the bottom, because we're going to move to working in rows. So what you'll be doing is doing trebles. So with a treble, we've just recapped the treble. You go round the hook first, in, through to the point where you've got your 3 loops, and then come through 2 and through 2. So that is a treble. So what you'll be doing is a row of trebles. And the reason why it's a row and not a round is because when you get to the end of that section, rather than carrying on in the same direction of our circle, what you're actually going to do is turn and come back the other way. So let's do some front post, back post so you can see how these teeth are made. So what a front post, back post treble is we're not actually going to be crocheting into the stitches. We're going to be crocheting around these posts that sit beneath. So we're going to be doing a treble, which means we have to go round our hook first. And to do a front post, we're going to come under the stitch and then out the other side to pull that bar forward. So we're pulling the treble forwards to do a front post, so to the front of the work. So 1, 2, and then we're going to do a back post next. So with a back post, we're going to be doing a treble. So we go round the hook in the same way, but here we come underneath and push that treble away from us. So push it to the back. So do you see how your hook is actually coming? So you go round the hook, your hook is coming up from the other side, being pushed backwards, and then you crochet around that post to push it away from yourself. And this is what creates a rib. So then if we're going to do another front one, you'd come in. I'm actually going to join in a new bit of yarn there because I've ran out of my bit of yarn that I've got. So we're going to do a front post treble again. So we come round the hook, down underneath, and pull that treble forwards towards us. So there's a front post. Then a back post will be coming in and pushing that away from us to create a back post. In. And a front post, and then back in. And a back post. And this is how the teeth are made. So do you see what you get is a little crocheted rib. The front posts are the ones that come forwards, the back posts are the ones that go backwards, and it just creates that one little line of teeth that you'll then be working on your skull before you then finish off in rows, and then just crochet all the way around the edge to give you a nice neat edge on the whole piece. And the only thing really to mention there that might feel a bit unusual is in order to get you the neatest finish, when it comes to this bit here, you will be crocheting up the sides of those trebles. That's, don't worry too much about where you're picking them up. It's just to neaten it all off into a nice curve. So as you come up and you go around this edge here, you'll just be crocheting into the sides of those trebles as you put a nice finish on it when it's finished. Now you crochet these in 2 separate pieces, you sew those on, and then you'll do your tiny little bits of embroidery for your nostrils. And as I said before, optional to do those on the back. And as I did last time, this is sewn into the apple and then the costume goes on top, but you could choose to sew the stalk onto the outside of the skull if you wanted to. Right, so that's those 2. Now, the next easiest is probably our Venomous. So let's just go through how you create the cobweb in order to put it in place. So what you're going to be doing with your cobweb is you will be crocheting 6 into a ring, so something you'll all be very familiar with. And then you're going to be chaining 22 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You know what? Rather than do the whole cobweb, I'm going to do a small one to show you the theory. But you will be obviously following the numbers within your pattern in order to create it. So once you've got the kind of base of your cobweb crocheted like this, so you're going to sew it in place, but obviously what you need to be able to do is still get that stick in there like that. So sew it slightly to one side, and what I would recommend doing is tacking it in place. So coming down like that and sewing the full length of these kind of bases on all sides. Now, obviously, I've done them shorter than yours will be. Yours will reach much lower down your apple. I've done them quite a bit shorter. So then the last thing that I really want to show you to do with this one is once you've sewn all of those in place, in order to create the true cobweb, what you'll then be doing is you're slip stitching into these like this. So slip stitch into that kind of framework of the 6, and then you'll just be chaining the numbers stated in between, and then slip stitching back across to the other side like that. And then you can either leave them loose if you want to, or if you want a slightly neater finish, you could also tack those in place as well. So what you would be doing is you'd then just be chaining like that, and immediately going on to your next one and slip stitching it into place. So that's how you build your cobweb up on the Venomous one. Now, just to mention safety eyes, the only other thing really to mention with the safety eyes, I know a lot of you wanted to have a good look at the brow. When it comes to adding your little brow onto your spider, all I've done is made the safety eyes sit almost within sockets. I put them in first, obviously secure them in, and then all I've done is I've crocheted across the top like that, just in 2 little almost semicircles, just to make those eyes look more integrated and part of the face. Right, so I think that's Venomous covered, techniques-wise. So now let's move on to lantern. So when it comes to lantern, there isn't too much to show you beyond those front posts and back posts, other than really the fact that you're going to be increasing and decreasing in them. So it's a very, very satisfying pattern, but I'll just run through a few of the techniques with you now. So all I want to show you with the lantern is the fact that what you're going to be doing is doing a front post treble. So as we did with the skeletal one, we were doing front post, back post. That's to create a rib to represent the teeth. But here, all we're doing is bringing out this one post and then we're trebling in between with increases to make it get bigger and smaller. But what we're doing is just doing these front posts in order to create these lines. So what you'll be doing is doing round your hook in and front posting. And then you might be doing increases in between. And when you're just doing normal trebles in between, all I want to really point out is you'll be going into the stitch like that as per normal. So you'll be front posting on your front post one, but in between those front posts, you'll be doing normal trebles like that into the tops of the stitch. Then if you were going back to do a front post again, you'll be going down and in to create that front post. And then in between, returning to your normal trebles again, going into the tops of the stitches. And that'll create then those ridges that stand out as you go around your lantern one. So the only other thing to clarify here is a treble two together, because that might be something that you've not done before. When it comes to a treble two together, treat it like a double crochet two together. So a regular treble, you're going to be going into the top of the stitch like that, unless it's specifically a front post. But to do a treble two together then, yarn round your hook like that and take one stitch and the next stitch. So very similar to the way that we would do a double crochet two together, and then just treble through those two half stitches like that. So just to recap that one more time, if it's a treble two together, you can see your next two stitches there, round the hook first, half and half, and then treble, but through those two halves like that to do your treble two together. So that's lantern covered. Right, now on to the two hardest ones, and they are rotten and poison. And the reason why they're difficult really is because of this invisible rose technique that you can choose to use or not use. It really is personal choice, but let me talk you through them so you've got the theory of how these ones work. So for me, poison is actually the most exciting apple, and that's actually not necessarily even to do with the design. It's to do with the fact that in the kit you get three colours. So you get green, you get ruby, and you get lime. And for me, they're all interchangeable. So I really like the idea of the fact that they all, you could make your apple in green and your poison in lime. You could make your, so you can basically mix and match them all the ways around to create different apples. So what I want to go through with this really is the theory of how it's made. But what I'm going to do is actually pull this one backwards. But before I show you that then, I'm almost going to go in reverse. So first I'm going to show you the theory of the drips. Then I'm actually going to pull it backwards so that as I deconstruct it, you'll see more clearly how the design actually works. So let's talk a little bit about drips initially. When it comes to the end, after you've created these shapes, the last bit that I've still got to do here is I've got to sew this closed to create my little, make my nose a little bit more pointy. So I've got a couple more stitches to do there. But the drips on the end, what you'll be doing is chaining and then coming back down these chains in order to put the drips on. And one question that I've had asked a lot is to do with them being right side or wrong side facing. So just to confirm, mine are right side facing, which means they curve upwards. For anybody who's finding that theirs are too curvy and not sitting flat, what causes them to do that is actually a discrepancy in your tension between your chain and then your stitches. So the drip that I'm going to do here is going to be my short one. So I've chained 6. Then what I do is I miss 1 and a half treble into the end like that. And then I slip back and this would be my shortest drip, will be a little short one that comes out like that. But what I want to talk about is if your tension is even between your chain and your stitches, then they shouldn't really curl up. They should actually sit nice and flat on the edge of that, the bottom of your apple. If you're finding that yours are very, very curly, then what I think it's likely to be is that your chain is much looser than your stitches, because your stitches are more likely to be tighter than your chain. So if you do one and you find that yours are really curled up like this and you're not happy with them because you want them to lay flat like that, all you need to do is play a little bit with your tension between the two things to make sure it's getting a little bit more even. So let me show you again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So my tension is really loose across the board there. That's going to mean that they sit nice and flat and they don't tighten up too much. And what you've got on the bottom of this pattern is basically drip lengths for short, medium and long, so that you can vary them wherever you want to in order to kind of customize all of these apples looking slightly different. So you can choose how to combine those as you go round. My only tip would be try to vary them, try not to get stuck in a pattern, because you'll find that if you do a similar repeated pattern, it won't look as good as if they do feel truly random. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pull backwards, and as I do so, talk you through the theory, because I think this will really help you understand the construction of this apple. So we'll be starting in the same way as the others, as in with the chain start like this, and we're doing our normal double crochet in a circle down like that. So you're almost creating another top of the apple like that until you get to this stage here. So you're working in rounds, you're working in your double crochet stitches. And then what you actually do here, and this is why I think this will help. So do you see there, you jumped across with that chain? What you're actually doing here is you chain 2 circles. Here we go. And this is where I want to get us back to, that you then come back to working in a round. So when we were up here after we'd made the top of our apple in a round, what you do is you chain a set number of stitches, and then you rejoin and do a few, and then you chain a second hole. And then through this segment here, what we're actually doing is we're not working in rounds, we're working in rows. So we're going backwards and forwards round this side of the apple between those 2 chain holes. And this is where this thing called invisible stitches comes in. So I'm going to pull back a bit further just so that you can see this properly, and so then I can show you properly a round of these invisibles. So when you're working the double crochet stitch in a non-stop spiral, which is what we do by and large for this style of crochet, we're constantly going in one direction round this circle. We're always working into the same side of the fabric, and so that's what makes the fabric texture look like this on the right side and look like this on the wrong side. So we have a definite right side and a wrong side. Now, when you're working rows, so when you're going backwards and forwards, usually you'd be turning the work around and you'd be going into the other side of the stitches. And that means that you get a ridged texture. So it's the same on both sides, but it is ridged rather than there being a definite right side and wrong side. Now, if we used that as part of this apple, what you'd find is this whole section here would have a different texture to the bit that comes above it. So this is where the idea of invisible rows comes in. So what invisible rows are is the ability to be able to work in rows, but it look like the same texture as when you're working in rounds for that double crochet stitch. Let me show you what I mean. So what you're going to be doing is, if you were just working in normal rows, when you're returning, you'd be going in to the wrong side of the fabric like this to work your double crochet stitch. And if you do that, what you will get straight away is a different appearance of stitches on this side. So your stitches will immediately give you a different texture on the outside of your work. So if you want it, and you don't have to use it, you really don't. The shape will be exactly the same. It will just have a slightly different stitch texture. If you want it to be perfect and look the same texture right the way through your piece, despite the fact that you're using rows, what you need to do is effectively crochet from back to front. So we're going to be doing our normal double crochet stitch, But rather than our normal position of coming in from the front to the back, we're going to come in from the back to the front like that, yarn over and take that yarn backwards with us, and then twist it around before finishing off that stitch. So you're going to come from the back to the front, yarn over, and then bring that through. So this is the invisible rose technique, and what it does is it creates your double crochet stitches, but you can't see a difference in texture that you're working rows to working in rounds, because you're actually crocheting into your right side of your fabric by coming from the back forwards and yarn over, then twist that stitch round in the middle and then finish it off. So from the back to the front, yarn over. The key is the twisting of that stitch just to neaten it up a little bit more before you complete the stitch. So what you're then doing to do these invisible rows is you're coming right the way across, and this is what I want to show you here. And in order to create these eye sockets in this piece, and it's exactly how you would then also create the holes for the maggot when we get onto the rotten one at the end, is you'll come right the way along, and then you will slip stitch 1 and 2 off your chain that you've left for your eye holes before you then turn back and you work back then in the opposite direction. But the most important thing, and this is written in the note in your pattern, so just make sure you've read all the small sections rather than just the maths for once. Make sure you read all the words as well, because when you turn, we're going to ignore the slip stitches. So when you turn and you go back, we ignore the slip stitches that you've done. So you count your 1, 2 slips, you don't go into those, you then go into that stitch there before you'd then be returning to go back in the opposite direction. Now I'm on the last round of rows there. So that was my last round of invisibles just to show you. And all I really want to show you now is the theory of from this point, we actually go back to rounds, because what you're going to be doing is crocheting right the way around the back of the apple before we then go up and actually work into the chains that go across those eye sockets. So once you reach this stage, this is then when you are continuing to work in a round. So you'll be coming up onto that chain that you left behind to work those sockets. So through this section, that's where you'll be doing what I've just shown you, where you slip stitch 2 and then you ignore it on the return pass. And then at this stage, this is when we start to turn it into a round again. So we're going to be crocheting up here and leaving our hole for our nose then that you tidy up at the end. So I hope that shows you the theory of the poison apple, almost by pulling it backwards. I think it probably helped you visualise those stitches moving more than the other way around. And that then brings me on to the rotten. So the rotten apple is probably one of the patterns that I've scratched my head about the most in recent years, I think, of how to make it happen. So what you're doing with your rotten apple, exactly the same thing as we have done with all the others. But what I will say is this one's not a costume. So you're not actually making a whole apple and then making a costume on it. We are actually crocheting an apple that has the hole running through it. So you don't make an apple and then dress it up. So with this one, you're crocheting the apple as per normal to the top. And then in exactly the same way that we did to create those eye holes for poison, what we're doing with this one is we're doing a chain and then we're leaving that chain there and then carrying on working the invisible rows on either side of that chain hole. So exactly the same technique of slipping the 2 off the chain and then doing your rows on the way back that I've just shown you with the poison. But what you're going to be leaving behind, so you start here, you crochet down the top and then you do that chain hole. Then you do this section in your invisible rows. And then just as you relax and you think, all right, I've reached the bottom of this hole, You actually then put yourself a second chain hole in like that. So you complete your apple with a diagonal hole running through the center of it. So once you've finished your main flesh bit, and I've done this one in chive, rather than in the original ruby, what you'll actually have is an apple that looks like this, with a hole like that in one side and a hole like that at the top in the other. Then what you'll be doing is crocheting a tube effectively in your primrose that will run through the middle. So you'll crochet this tube piece. And then what you need to do is really put your stuffing in and open up the hole between the two pieces. So make sure you've opened up that hole between the two before you insert your tube in like that. And then to finish it off and make it really neat, you actually then crochet the tube into place with your primrose yarn around the edge of that hole. And that's why, for anyone who is worried about making sure that it looks really neat as you slip those stitches off the hole, don't worry too much, because we will actually be crocheting right the way around that edge. So you will be covering all of that up anyway. So get your tube in like that. And then what you do is you go in and you crochet right the way around the edge like that. So for anyone that's doing the invisible rose technique for the first time, if you go and watch the booties video or the bow the dragon video, I do go through it in greater depth using chunky yarn. So if you really want to go and get a thorough look at that, then go and watch those videos. This one really, I wanted to serve more as a recap to those that might have done it before, or going through the various structures of these different toffee apples, so you've got them all in one place. So I'm just going right the way around the edge here in my primrose in order to close up my rotten apple with my hole running through the center. And so the only last thing really to recap, I just want to show you Clyde the maggot a second, so you can see how I finished him off in terms of his detailing. So come right the way around the edge. Like that. Then in the last one, I'll just slip in and then I'll tidy that up with my yarn. And when I'm sewing that final ending, I'll just always sew it into the first one, so I get a nice neat hole on both sides. So let's just talk a little bit about Clyde. All you're doing here, so you can see the detail, is with this one, when you've got your safety eyes in, I've just embroidered those two little eyebrows across the top, so just a few wraps of yarn across the top. I have slip stitched right the way around him in order to create these segments with this one. So it is actually a very straightforward, easy make, and I've just slip stitched the detail onto the top like that. And then when it comes to his legs, you're just bobbling those on wherever you want them to. Really, you just bobble those onto the bottom, add those bobbles on afterwards, so he's got those little legs underneath. And the design, in my mind, he's always intended to look upwards, so he should be climbing upwards through his apple, like that, when he's in position, climbing up from the bottom through, so you can see it out both sides of the apple when you have finished. Right, I think that covers all the techniques. I apologise for it being A, so long, and B, such a whistle stop tour, but I wanted you to have all the different techniques in one place so that you can have fun with your making your different toffee apples across all 6. I really look forward to seeing them in some different colours. I think these are ones that you will enjoy over and over and over again. Now, as one final hack, for anybody who does have the apple core pattern from Flora Society, you can actually, I deliberately designed this apple to match the size and scale of that apple core. So if you want to be very clever, you can put the start of your apple onto that apple core, and you'll actually also then be able to create yourself an eaten toffee apple, where your stick insert will be able to go in, but you'll just have an apple core left on your stick. So I'm just going to throw that one out there for anyone that wants to take it one step further. You could effectively do a 7th one by using your apple core pattern.